Hey guys, Dane from Scoggin-Dickey Parts Center, and as you can see, we're in the dyno today. We're going to be working on a wide variety of products that we've been kind of developing in-house. This is stuff that we've actually had in our hands for a little bit, but we've just been really busy with other projects going on here for our customer builds. So as you can see over my shoulder, that's not an LS or an LT like you guys might be used to seeing. We are back in here with the HEMI. Last time that we were in here with the HEMI was with a 5.7. We're back in here now with a 6.4, so this is just a regular Mopar crate. So we have those on the website as well as 5.7s plus Hellcats. So this one is going to have a few different camshafts that we're going to test as well as intakes. So starting off, we're going to do a stock baseline using the Mopar crate engine controller, just like the one that I've talked about in a previous video. So all of this is going to get a good baseline. We're going to go from there and then start adding a few different camshaft grinds. Some of them that we've done before in the 5.7 that we've had a lot of customers ask, well, it works in a 5.7, how well does it do in a 6.4? Well, we get to tell you today. So then after this stock baseline, there's going to be some minor changes. We're going to go from the Mopar controller to a Holley Dominator, as well as we're going to make a valve spring change just to make sure everything else is good to go. Those camshafts that we're going to be testing out, we're also going to be locking up a phaser limiter, so just that way everything is apples to apples comparison of just the camshaft from one set to the very, very last. So we're going to go ahead, get a stock baseline run, and then we'll come back in and talk about the results for that, and then move on to the next cam. Okay, so we just got done with the stock baseline on the 6.4 HEMI. And so the power numbers, we got 524 horsepower and 523 pound-feet of torque. So for some of you guys that are paying attention, you're like, hey, those numbers are kind of high. They would look like that. It's just that there's a few different things you're going to be considering. So normally these are rated at 485 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque. And that's using a different SAE correction. So that's the J1349, and we're actually, on this dyno, we're using J607 for the SAE correction. If you guys have got some questions about that, you can easily Google it, but I'll go through and we can post a link about it in the description for our videos. And maybe it'll be a good tech video for me to talk about at a later point in time as well. Because I know that we've had some questions about that for our LS engines that we've done in the past, and a few other engines as well, that people were like, well, you know, that power seems kind of high, you've got a happy dyno. You'll look at this, a lot of the other companies in our industry use the J607 correction. But so, we've got our stock baseline. We've got Gordon here. He's going to tear into this thing and swap out the cam, as well as the valve springs. And we're going to start doing a rip on our next camshaft. And I'll pop back in and give you guys some information on what we got out of that one. Okay, so this is why we test in the dyno cell and why it's such an important tool for us, especially whenever we're testing out different camshaft grinds. With the Stage 2 camshaft over the stock baseline, there was no horsepower gain. It made 524 horse. Again, it did make some gains as far as the torque is concerned, which is 546 pound-feet of torque, so that was 23 pound-feet gain over stock. So really not really worth the effort as far as putting a Stage 2 cam in your 6.4. We've got some other grinds that we're going to be testing, which is why we're here. We're looking forward to this because we've got quite a few different camshafts that we need to test out. So Gordon is currently buttoning this one up, and we're going to go ahead and do some more pulls on the next cam, and then we'll go over the data afterwards. Okay, so we just finished up doing the popular El Chapo camshaft, which did pretty well on the 5.7 in our previous video that we've done. This time around also was pretty good. The horsepower gain, not a whole lot. It has a really nice street presence for you guys who are looking more for the sound over anything. So this one made 530 horsepower, which is a 6 horsepower gain. And then it made 554 pound-feet of torque, which is 31 pound-feet gain over the stock baseline. So once again, this one's been really popular with our guys, just looking for something that gives it a rowdy presence, so to speak. And so the guys are going through making a few changes, and we're going to go through with the next camshaft, make some pulls, and we'll go over the data after that. So with this camshaft, it's one that we haven't tested before on the 5.7, so this is a new cam to test on the 6.4. And so this one was a little bit of a different setup. The main focus on it is really to get you a little bit more torque mid-range, especially for anybody that's going to be towing with a truck. So really, it's going to be, most of the gains that you're going to be seeing is going to be from about 3,000 RPM on up to about 5,000 RPM, kind of where a lot of the times the torque kind of drops off. And then of course horsepower was a bit of a gain overall. So it was 538 horsepower with a 14 horsepower gain and a 544 pound-feet of torque, which was 21 pound-feet gain over stock. So another thing to consider on this camshaft like this one is really nice, mellow, not a super lopey idle or anything else like that. So really, when I was talking to Gordon about this, on an 8-speed truck, you probably wouldn't have to consider a torque converter or aftermarket torque converter, but with a 5-speed, you might need to consider that, as well as, you know, making sure that, you know, you have to consider other components that you're running, whether it be tire size, rear end gear, all that other stuff. If you have questions on that camshaft or any of the other camshafts that we have, feel free to give us a call and we can spec out something for you, or just tell you that, you know, you just need to make sure that you've got some good tuning done on your transmission itself. So we're done with this one. The guys are already in the process of swapping it out to another camshaft, and we're going to make some rips with that one. We'll get right back to it with some more data. Okay, so we finished up the dyno run with the stage 3 camshaft. Gordon is already hard at work as far as getting everything swapped over to the next camshaft that we're going to test. So you guys might remember the dyno video that we did with the 5.7 HEMI. That made 498 horsepower with that one. So for this one, we made 549 horsepower and 550 pound-feet of torque. So that's a gain of 25 horse and 27 pound-feet of torque over the stock baseline, which is actually pretty good. You know, we pretty much expected these kind of numbers out of this setup. Now, of course, to remind you that, you know, we're still only doing like 6,200 RPM. We're not carrying it like way out to crazy red lines, 65, 7,000 RPM or whatever. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to our stage 4, which is a little bit more aggressive camshaft. And we're actually going to increase the RPM to about 6,500 RPM just to see what it does, because it's a little bit more race inspired. Might be something that some of you guys might want to use in your car or in a aftermarket swap into, you know, a resto mod or anything else like that. So we're gonna make some rips with that one, and we'll be right back with a little bit more data. Okay, so we just finished up with the stage 4 dyno. Made some really solid numbers, honestly. So it's 560 horsepower and 550 pound-feet of torque. So you got a gain of 36 horsepower over stock and 27 pound-feet of torque. Really, this is nice. We managed to make it carry on pretty much from 6,000 RPM to 6,500 RPM. Like overall, the horsepower looked pretty flat across the top end. Really, it'll be interesting to see what we can do with this one. This is our last camshaft that we're testing as far as the different grinds at the moment, but we have a little bit of a treat for you, because I know that with the 5.7 video that we kind of ruffled some feathers, so to speak, because we, you know, put a 6.4 intake on a 5.7 and did some testing. Well, now we're stepping backwards. We're going to put the 5.7 intake on the 6.4, and we're going to see what it does. So we're going to see the numbers on that one to be able to do kind of a apples to apples comparison with a max effort camshaft that's built for pretty broad power band. On top of that, we have some more intakes that we're going to test. We also have one that we had endless questions on social media about. This was, well, what about a 6.1 intake? I mean, I know you guys feel a little bit left out because we didn't have something like that. So this time around, on a good sized 6.4, we're putting a 6.1 that's unported as well as ported. We're going to be doing testing with that one, as well as a Holley high ram. Now, of course, one thing that is not going to be in this picture really overall, because we already tested it before on the 5.7, and you're just going to have to spin the ever-loving fire out of the engine to be able to make any power out of it. We're not using that sheet metal sniper style intake. So the really short runners, they just really don't have any use, especially for a regular street car that's naturally aspirated. So we're going to be testing these out with this setup. We're really looking forward to the results for the Holley high ram, just because of the fact that if you've paid attention to any of our other dyno videos that we do for the race shop, any of our custom spec built LS engines or LT, they make wonderful power with a Holley high ram intake. So once again, we get to test and you guys get to learn and be able to make really good choices on your own components for your own personal ride. So once again, we'll finish this up and we'll start making some pulls, and we'll go over the data afterwards. Okay, so to streamline things a little bit on the very end of this video, we did a full intake test in comparison on our last stage 4 camshaft that we ran, which originally did 560 horsepower and 550 pound-feet of torque. We then went from the stock 6.4 intake manifold and made a few changes. We did the 5.7 intake, we also did a 6.1 intake that was unported, a ported intake, and then we tested a Holley high ram. So first off, shout out to the guys at HHP, Josh and Bruce. They actually loaned us the 6.1 intakes to be able to use this, so don't blow up our phones going, you guys have got 6.1 intakes? Because we don't have those in stock. These were something that was loaned to us for this special test. We did do a lot of learning during this process. So we went from the 6.4 intake to the 5.7 intake. And so, like I had said before, we made 560 horsepower and 550 pound-feet of torque. The 5.7 intake made 557 horsepower and 548 pound-feet of torque. So still, you're going to look at the peak numbers and go, that wasn't really a whole lot of a change. But whenever you look at the chart, there's going to be a lot of meat in some of the other areas of the power band that you're going to notice the difference between the 6.4 and the 5.7. And a lot of that is going to be contributed to, you know, the variable runner length and everything. But also, you're dealing with a 6.4 HEMI with a very large race cam versus, you know, the old argument of what this would do on a stock 5.7 with a 6.4 intake. So, of course, there's probably going to be some people that will not agree with us on this, but I mean, we did back-to-back polls on this one, including doing the variable runner lengths as well on the 6.4 intake. So moving along from that, we dive into the 6.1 intake. And so you look at the 6.1 intake, you're gonna be like, oh, it's an old, you know, it's an old HEMI intake. It's like, what could they possibly have done very well with this? It's a cast aluminum piece instead of the fancy, you know, injected plastic. So really the data was really cool. It made 560 horsepower on the unported intake and 547 pound-feet of torque. There's definitely a shift in the power down low, but I mean, it was nice to be able to see that, yeah, it still was making power. The ported intake was the one that was really fun because it made 575 horsepower and 547 pound-feet of torque. The horsepower just started to carry on a little bit more on up to our red line, which we had it at 6,500 RPM. Moving from the 6.1 ported intake, we decided that, hey, especially we planned on this in advance, we got a Holley high ram because we're actually going to be using a HEMI in another project in the future. So make sure to pay attention and subscribe for that one because we have a really neat HEMI build that's kind of waiting in the wings for its limelight, either on the dyno as well as out on the track. So we also moved from 6,500 RPM to 7,200 RPM because we went up in increments on this one and we still needed more RPM. We had to spin this thing some more. And with the full race cam and everything else like this, it was 611 horsepower and 547 pound-feet of torque. It was definitely a dip in the torque down low, but from about 4,500 RPM on up to redline, it carried power all the way. So it started to dip right around 7,000 RPM and flatten out. And so you guys will be able to see that in the dyno charts. So really that concludes our test on the 6.4 HEMI with our cam for our cam profiles as well as these intakes. And we're looking forward to some other projects that we have coming up soon. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment in on our videos. We love to hear either other questions that you might have in regard to these platforms or other platforms. There's always burning questions that sometimes you might see that we might be able to answer those a little bit more efficiently than others. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook as well as social media elsewhere on Instagram, sometimes even on TikTok, if you guys just really want to do a really short condensed viewing. Once again, thanks for watching the video. You guys make it happen and make it possible for us because the fact that all this stuff is for you. It's to be able to make things easier for you to choose the components for your car, for you guys to go out and enjoy driving like the rest of us. So thanks again for stopping by, and we will see you guys next time.